Hey everyone, and thank you for joining me on this quick little explanation of what inspired drive is and what I'm driving to make it happen. This is my 2000 Toyota MR2 Spyder. It's been a dream car of mine for a lot of years, ever since probably about 2005. I had a good friend in Northwest Indiana who had one and built it exceptionally well, and at that time encouraged me to continue working on a car that at the time I had a lot of doubt in. The whole reason that I want my drives to be inspired is because I believe there is something special in the act of performance driving. That doesn't necessarily have to mean street racing, that doesn't necessarily have to mean track racing, that doesn't need to mean any of those things. What it simply means is that you and your car have a special bond, that you and the apex have a special bond. That time spent between the braking point and the acceleration point of any given curve or straight line should create for you a special bond. And so most recently, this is the car that I've chosen to do it in. The reason I chose this car, aside from it being a dream car of mine from the early 2000s, is that next to the Miata NA, it's the lightest weight sports car that you can buy. Now, I know that there are going to be some other super expensive examples, such as the Ariel Atom, the Lotus Elise, Lotus Exige, the BAC Mono, if you're particularly spendy. Those are all examples of cars that you could probably buy that are a little bit lighter or a little bit more aggressive than this car, but this car is special. And the reason why is that it's livable. I am 6'3" and 238 pounds, and this car and I fit together very well. As far as headspace, there's a good 1.5 to 2 inches here, and I am sitting bolt upright. Legroom, I could use a little bit more knee swing under the steering wheel, but aside from that, I can't really complain. My wife's Miata, which is an NB1, it's significantly harder for me to drive. So I wanted a roadster to drive with my wife when she wanted to drive her car, and it occurred to me that maybe now was the time to look into this dream car that I'd wanted for so many years. Prior to this, I had a 2018 Chevrolet Camaro 1SS, and while that car was undeniably fast with 455 crank horsepower and 455 torque, it was absolutely fast, it was bonkers on the freeway, and it handled incredibly well. Matter of fact, as far as driving dynamics goes, it has recently been listed by a trustworthy publication as being one of the best power to weight ratio cars you can currently buy for under $50,000. So it was a very good car. At the end of the day, however, it had one sin that was just unacceptable. It was boring. It was all computerized. It pretty much went fast for you. Something like this MR2, on the other hand, completely different vibe. Definitely not as fast in the traditional sense, but it is a different kind of fast. And I'll be certain to talk about that in an upcoming video. I've already got it planned out. But what's special about this car is that in a lot of ways, it's a platform. Much like an S13 or an S14 is a platform. You don't see a lot of people going out and getting excited about driving those cars around with their factory KA24DE motors and thinking that they're very fast. But that's not the point of those cars. They're engineered well, they're affordable, and you could put any setup in them that you wanted. They're platform cars, and they can be obnoxiously fast. The same applies here. It's an incredibly well-balanced car. The turn-in, the tip-in, the body roll, everything is unlike any other car I've ever driven. It is super communicative. As for weight, as of my last reading, it weighs 2193 2,195, that's correct, 2,195 curb weight pounds. And I believe that's on a full tank and without a driver. Not 100% certain. But you can absolutely feel that absence of weight when you drive this car. Another thing that I wasn't expecting upon buying this car was that it would be geared for top end as well as it is. It can actually reach 100 miles an hour quite easily. Now, I know that doesn't necessarily seem like that big of a deal, but you've got to remember that this car only has 138 horsepower out of its little 1.8 liter Toyota 1ZZ FE engine. And a similar car, my wife's Miata, for example, struggles to hit 90. All the torque is in the lower gears, so it's definitely geared for more of a mid-range car, whereas this one seems to do well much higher up the rev range, or up the gear range. I was very impressed by that, and I'm actually impressed with the overall speed of this car. Again, it's not a 400 horsepower American muscle car. It is not a it's not a boosted Evo or an STI. It's not that kind of fast. Is it fair to say that it is fast? Yes. It is a different kind of fast. I believe there are several different kinds, and you've got your obvious, your blatant kind, your 500-600 horsepower and up, your Texas 2K types. Then you've got cars that are actually meant to handle, so more like 4 to 5, maybe even as low as 300, 350. And then you have something else entirely, and that's when you start talking about your Lotuses, your Miatas, and your cars that are nimble despite having significantly less horsepower than other cars. They still somehow seem to pass them on track days. Color me surprised, but I know that this car I'm driving right now with a competently swapped 2ZZ Toyota engine will run with Porsches. I know that because I've seen it. Nothing else. And that only accounts for about 160 to 180 wheel horsepower with that engine swap. So there is something there. Again, it's a different kind of fast. Again, I'll get into that in another video. But what I love about this car is the communication. I love the turn-in. I love the confidence inspiring feel of it. I love the way it sounds. I love the way it feels. Interior-wise, for a 20-year-old car in the 2000s, the early 2000s, I feel like auto manufacturers, especially companies like Nissan, Toyota, and Mazda, finally figured out what they wanted their interiors to feel like. I had a 2004 Mazda RX-8 years and years ago, probably back in 2008. And to this day, I would say that that car still holds the gold standard for a nice interior, the place where you want to be, the place where you feel cool. That car, it has the auto-dimming dash light so that when you turn it up, the actual gauges turn from white to red. Little things like that. It felt special. And I would say that a lot of Japanese automakers in the early 2000s kind of had that same feel, because this car has got it in spades. I love that it's got the center console with a dip in front of the gear shift, as though it's a completely separate thing. It's a great place to store a hat or a pistol or whatever you have on you at the time that you just want to place somewhere. It's got a storage cubby up top and a very large glove compartment. It even has 2 storage compartments behind the driver and passenger seat that like to fill up with water, which is exciting because everybody needs a place to rinse their hands at the end of a long drive. So I'm pretty grateful for that. It's awesome. Other things about this car, it is definitely quick. You will be surprised when the 1ZZ accelerates you the way it does, especially being mostly stock. Of course, there is the elephant in the room, and I guess I have to address that, and that is that the 1ZZ engine, because of an oversight by Toyota, will basically eat itself alive between 100,000 to 120,000 miles if you have a Toyota built between 2000 and 2003. If it's built from 2003 to 2005, they solved the problem. What it is that the factory header or exhaust manifold that came on the car had 2 pre-catalytic converters that made every car they made up to California's new ridiculous emission standards. And so the car had a sum total of 3 catalytic converters from the header to the tailpipe. okay? 3 catalytic converters. That's all fine and well. You've got these 2 cylinders on the header, one on each of the first 2 banks of the header, so 1 and 1. And you had an O2 sensor associated with each one as well. Great, no problem. Those catalytic converters, in the absence of very strict and careful engine care, like miss your oil change by 500 miles 3 or 4 times, and you risk plugging up the oil galleys in the pistons, not allowing them to drain adequately, which builds up the wrong kind of heat in the engine, thus building up the wrong kind of heat in the pre-catalytic converters, and those guys break up. And when they break up, I mean that the platinum and ceramic pieces inside of those catalytic converters turn to dust and become aerosol, meaning they can go anywhere. They can go out the exhaust, if you're lucky, or when you get valve overlap and the engine inhales from the exhaust side, that's right, you're getting platinum and ceramic pieces into your engine, scoring the sides of your cylinder wall, massive oil leakage, or even severe premature engine detonation. Not a great way for a ultra reliable Toyota engine to go the long haul like they're known to do. This, of course, was my first Toyota I have ever bought. And since I bought it, somehow I have found a way to run into just about every problem I can with this car. I heard about the issues with the precats on the factory exhaust manifold, so the very first thing I did, I put on an aftermarket header. Well, that caused me to find all sorts of problems with my exhaust, so I repaired that, and as of now, I'm quite pleased. It is a great sounding car. It's pleasant to drive in. I don't find it too droning, and I just think it sounds pretty nice. But as of 2 weeks ago, I parked this car in the backyard expecting not to get it out again for another 6 months because I had a sudden loss of cylinder 1. I had a friend come out who diagnosed and checked and just helped me rule out in a parking lot that it wasn't coil packs, but we didn't know what it was. If it's not coil packs, of course, it could have been spark plugs. You know, I read on the forums that it's entirely possible that some of the spark plugs for these cars fail internally. That's odd. I've never heard of that happening, but okay. Of course, it could be fuel injectors. It could be a lot of different things. But the one thing we didn't want to talk about was that it could be a loss of compression. Meaning that even though I went through the effort of protecting this motor against itself by getting those pre-catalytic converters out before they collapsed, the engine still might have just been a crappy example, and so we might have lost a cylinder via loss of piston rings or something like that. So I flat towed it home. That night when we got it home, I went ahead and just turned it on and drove it into the backyard, and it sounded perfect. No indication that we had lost a cylinder or that there was any kind of misfire at all. So in that moment, we more or less ruled out the notion that it could be an actual mechanical engine problem. Good news. Okay. So yesterday, I went ahead and changed the spark plugs out on this guy. Just one thing I can control, one thing I can do. And I drove it around for, I don't know, half hour or so. I didn't have any problems. Today I'm taking it a lot further, and we got our fingers crossed that we don't have any problems return because I am a ways from home. So, you know, no risk, no reward, right? But it's hard to stay mad at this car. You know, the whole reason that my last car was a 2018 Camaro SS was that I was okay with a big payment, so long as I could have warranty and reliability and not have to think so much about all the things going wrong and have to deal with a tuner car. Trust me, I may be old. I mean, I guess 34 is kind of old. But what I can tell you is that tuner cars get old. The notion that you have to constantly be listening, is the engine making a questionable noise? Is there something wrong with my suspension? Did something rust and snap? Is there a bolt broken off? Did I lose a stud in the block because it's just old metal? That stuff gets old. I'm sorry. There is just no amount of love that you can have for a car that redeems it past that point. But this is my dream car, and I'm not getting any younger, and these examples, these available cars aren't either. So it was either shit or get off the pot. It also didn't help that COVID got me laid off this year and into a job that paid significantly less than I was used to. So that $585 a month Camaro payment suddenly didn't make nearly so much sense. Went ahead, sold it, got myself a significantly smaller loan, bought this car. So at least financially it makes more sense, but it has to stay driving for that to remain the case. But if the wheels are turning, I'm in love with it. This car is love. This car satisfies on a level that few have ever done. You know, I have owned cars that I built a relationship with long term, and the longer I drove them, the more I decided that I was a driver and the cars were my tools. The spirit of the drive, the spirit of the car, the communication between car and driver wasn't really there in some of these vehicles, and I was just going to be a driver with the possession of a good tool. That was it. That was all it was going to be. This car, this little MR2, this little two-seater, brings me back to when it was special again. I can't really explain it, but it does. What do I think? I think these cars are vastly underrated. I think it's an absolute crime that nobody in the larger channels, your Donut Media, your that Dude in Blue, David Patterson, none of your big car guys are talking about this car. It's a forgotten car. Let me tell you, this thing is a platform. I give you another 5 years and people will be clawing for these things. They are the lightest weight vehicle you can buy without spending $30,000 on a Lotus Elise. They are the best handling car you can buy, and I know that because I also own a Miata. Stock to stock, Miata stands no chance, not even a little, and I'll stand by that. For a driver, for the discerning driver, for the inspired driver, there is no car that works quite as well as the 2000 to 2005 Toyota MR2 Spyder. If you have the means, I thoroughly recommend it. That's it for now, guys. I'll catch you in the next one. Well, that's it for today, folks. Want to thank you for taking the time to watch. I hope you enjoyed the video. I had a great time recording it. Just wanted to let you all know that this is it's the beginning of a community. I want to make this conversation as widely available as possible, and it starts here today. So if you could, please give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and maybe even share it with your friends. If you'd like, you can connect with me on Instagram at inspired_drive, and I'll look forward to talking with you there. As of right now, we're a small channel. Any comments will be the catalyst for a whole conversation, so get in contact. I'd love to hear from you. Again, guys, thanks again. Have a great rest of your day, and drive inspired. Does that sound cool? I think it sounds cool. Catch you guys.